earlier this afternoon, I really had no idea how to introduce him. So I went over to his booth and spoke with him. And he said that other people in my position previously have introduced Joel by saying, here's Joel Spolsky, he needs no introduction. Well, I didn't really think that would do him justice. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Joel was a paratrooper. I'm not really sure how that gives him credibility for his next talk, but it's an interesting tidbit nonetheless. Joel also used to work at Microsoft and is going to be speaking about how products that are number one either in software or in hardware are do not always have the most features and are sometimes more expensive than other products that are number 2 or 3 in those same categories. So here's Joel Spolsky. Please give him a large round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see here. We got this ready. Before I start, I want to share with you something that caught my eye at the airport newsstand. Let's see. It's about a month ago. Newsweek magazine, which some of you may still read by mistake, ran an article that was called 15 People Who Make America Great. And the number one person who makes America great is, of course, Brad Pitt. Woohoo! There's the cover where it's Brad Pitt along with, 5 other people that you've never heard of. Now, I don't really want to belittle Brad Pitt. He's a fine actor. But I'm sort of wondering if maybe the reason they chose him is because putting Brad Pitt on the cover sells magazines. Nah. Nobody would just put celebrities on their cover just to sell magazines, would they? So I guess what I'm trying to prove is that Newsweek is a trashy magazine. and I've found that every time I read Newsweek, but I know a little bit less about the world than I knew before I started. I tend to read the BBC. They're a lot more respectable. It's English. It's state-funded. They have no need to put gratuitous pictures of Brad Pitt or Jennifer Aniston on their magazine. This is actually an article about Dr. Atkins when he died. They ran, can I go backwards? Yes, diet grew critical after fall. This was Dr. Atkins who invented that diet where you can't eat any carbohydrates. And so rather than running a picture of him, of course, they put Brad and Jennifer on there. I can't think of any reason to do that, which is sort of unrespectable. So we'll get down to business. Let me just leave this up for a while. Maybe I'll sell some fog bugs or something. This is the official topic of the speech, which I'll read to you. Too many teams create very decent products that, for whatever reason, fail to rise above the crowd and truly capture the popular imagination. Then they're surprised when their products are mostly ignored by the marketplace, which seems to be captivated by some other shiny geegaw that's functionally inferior and more expensive. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted here. So let me start, since I'm getting distracted by Brad Pitt, let me start by asking if there's what is special about Brad Pitt? Why is he everywhere? Why do people use him to sell magazines? Why do I have a picture of him up there? Same thing with Jennifer Aniston. I'm trying to be an equal opportunity offender here. There are other actors that I think are just as good looking, just as good actors, just as qualified as Brad Pitt, like Ian Somerhalder, who nobody's ever heard of. You never hear anybody putting him on their magazine cover and saying, Ian Somerhalder is one of the 15 people who makes America great. They don't use him on stories about diet doctors dying. Just as good looking as Brad Pitt, Ian Somerhalder is just as good an actor, but frankly, nobody's ever heard of him. So he's kind of the off-brand, bargain basement, slightly damaged, discount version of Brad Pitt. To put it another way, if Brad Pitt were an Apple iPod, then Ian Somerhalder would be the Creative Nomad Zen Jukebox Extra. It has more features. It costs $150 less than the equivalent iPod. It synchronizes with Microsoft Outlook, but nobody wants one. They all want iPods. The Apple iPod was something like 90% of the MP3 player market for last Christmas. So the bottom line is that Ian Somerhalder is just an off-brand Brad Pitt. And so while Brad Pitt might get $20 million to be in a movie, Ian would get a gift certificate for Supercuts. And I promise not to poke you in the eye. Okay, so there's something really subtle going on here that I think is actually relevant. There's something fleeting, something that's really, really hard to pin down about the difference between the blue chip products, who I have there on the left-hand side, and the off-brand products. Sometimes it's really surprising when a particular product turns out to be a blue chip product. For example, when the Herman Miller first came out with this Aeron chair, about 10 years ago, I guess, everybody thought that it looked like a bug. But, you know, it sort of grew on them. And people realized it was comfortable, and even though it looked weird, that only kind of made it more unique, and that made people more apt to identify the Herman Miller Aeron chair, even though it at first was ugly, and now it's actually considered rather beautiful. And everybody makes clones. There's about 1 million different kinds of clones you can buy. They cost less money. They may be ergonomically superior. But nobody wants them, you know. They want the Herman Miller Aeron. They want Brad Pitt in their movies. They want Jennifer Aniston. And if you get your significant other a creative Zen Jukebox Nomad Extra for their birthday, then you're going to be sleeping in the tool shed. So just to prove to you that this concept isn't entirely unique to movie actors and MP3 players, the same kind of thing happens with music. All right, so you may remember this song from the 70s, the usual band Looking Glass. Really absolutely abysmal, awful song, but it did make it to number one, and it's sort of a staple of blues act, and all the classical rock. And if you're an alien from Mars, you might think that that was a pretty popular song. That sucks. But there are other songs from that period, like Sweet Home Alabama, and Skinner, that people love. And Sweet Home Alabama is actually sort of a secret of DJ. You know that if you're ever playing at a wedding, if you've ever been to Bourbon Street in New Orleans, Bourbon Street or 6th Street in Austin, you can sort of go up and down the street, and there are all these bars playing live music. And you can go into any bar you want. You can do that for like an hour and not hear any song other than Sweet Home Alabama, because it's like that popular. And what's really weird is that, you know, they're both these number one hits from the 70s. They're both mainstays of classic rock radio, but one is awful and one of them rocks. So, there you go. Somehow, somewhere, when you get to the very, very high strata of popular mass market products, at the very, very top level, after you get something that's merely competent and merely successful, that does what it needs to do, there's yet another higher level, that little extra something, I don't know what it is, that makes a product into a blue chip hit, a product that everybody feels like they have to have that particular one, even if it's more expensive and inferior. So how do you do that? And this is a question that's of concern to me, of course, because in developing software, you see the same thing. In consumer electronics, you see it. So I came up with this really sloppy, messy formula that I came up with in about 45 seconds and haven't thought about very hard. But this is my formula for the kinds of things you're going to start thinking about after you make a piece of software and you make it really exactly do what it needs to do and meet a market need. To go beyond that and to make a blue chip hit, you're going to have to think about three things. Number one, making people happy. Number two, you have to think about emotions. And I'll go over each of these. That's pretty much the outline of my talk. Number three, you have to obsess over aesthetics. So I'm going to start with making people happy. And I don't really claim to know how to do this, but I want to share with you one particular way that works pretty well. Where am I? Oh, okay, I have to tell you a story to explain this. Let's say that you wake up one morning, and you're about to go to class, and you grab your digital camera, because we all take our digital cameras to class with us, and you're walking down the street, and you see like a really, really cute cat, and you want to put it up on your live journal page or whatever on your blog. So I don't really like cats. A puppy, you see a really cute puppy, you decide you're going to put them up on your live journal page. You take a picture of the puppy. You get into wherever you're going, wherever it is you're going. But first you stop off at the coffee shop, at Starbucks, or whatever it is that you have here. You get one of these quadruple venti. That's the really, really, really big. It's called the bedwetter size espresso. Sort of like a big gulp, but it's all caffeine. You get back home to your computer, and your goal in life is going to be to, let's see, what did I say you were going to do? You're going to upload this picture of a puppy to your live journal page. So, first thing you have to do, of course, is log on to your computer. Let's see. I have a simulation which I created here. Process. Excuse me. Now, see, this is actually, it's just a simulation which I did in PowerPoint. This is not the actual error message that you get from Microsoft if you fail to log on. They would never use like red text with a gray background. All right, try again. Oh, and that time I had caps lock on. There we go. And eventually, get it there. Okay, so what you're going to do is you got the digital camera with the picture that you've just taken on it, and sometimes you can't do that right away. Let's see what it says. Microsoft Critical Update notification. New critical updates are available for your computer. Microsoft strongly recommends that you install these updates now, and then there's another 2 paragraphs there which nobody reads. All right, what have I got? Let's see. Windows Update, support Windows Sites Update for fragmented IGMUP packet security vulnerability. All right, I don't really have a choice here, so I guess I'll go ahead and upgrade it. This is, again, a simulation. So it installs the updates. At this point, actually, because of that Starbucks espresso, installing new updates. You see, people who make installer programs don't understand what a percent is. It's just blinking lights. All right, that's done. And done, good. And now you're going to plug in the digital camera. You're going to upload the picture of your blog. There's that great lie of our time. In order to serve you better, you must reboot your computer. Now, okay, I'm not going to actually do this in the demo, although it's tempting. Thankfully, this is a demo, and I don't have to show you that. You reboot your computer. That takes a couple of minutes. When it finally comes back up, you close all the windows that the real player is open for you accidentally, and various advertising things that come up and pop-ups and so forth. And you take the digital camera. You've got your USB cable. You plug the USB cable into the digital camera, plug that into the front of your computer, and fortunately, Windows has plug and play. So you get some kind of a cool message, new device found. That's really good. Sometimes it needs to swap in a part of the Windows operating system which you hadn't originally installed, and it starts asking for a Windows CD-ROM. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever seen a Windows CD-ROM. Probably, I remember there used to be Windows floppy disks, but most computers these days don't come with a Windows CD-ROM, so you start saying, how is that possible? And at this point, you really have to go to the bathroom because of the large espresso that I told you about earlier. And but you just want to kind of get this damn thing done, so you start shuffling around, and you ask your friends, and you go down the hall, and one of your friends has a CD-ROM, but it's Windows XP Home Edition, not Professional Edition, so it yells at you about that. And finally, you find somebody who has access to the MSDN website because of their internship at Microsoft, which is the only good thing about working there. And and you get they log on for you, and they download the ISO from the MSDN website for the exact version that you need, and then you look on download.com, and you can find all kinds of ISO rippers, writers, whatever, which will write the ISO to your CD, and you go find a blank CD-ROM, put that in, record it on his computer, take the CD-ROM back to your desk, and now you're ready to put it in, and you're finally going to get to do what you wanted to do in the first place, which was to upload a picture of a puppy to your live journal site. And when you push the little button on to eject the CD tray thingamajiggy, the CD tray comes out and knocks over the coffee into your lap, And so you'll leap up, and you're burning, and flames are exploding, and the coffee's all over the keyboard, and it's everywhere. And when you leap up, you accidentally unplug the digital camera from the USB port. And you know that you can't remove hardware without you are not allowed to remove hardware without clicking on the little button in the taskbar thingy to say that you're going to remove it. Hey, do not remove things without telling Microsoft Windows first. Tell us first. And there's something there in small print, which I won't read. There might be kids in the audience, and I wouldn't want to fuck with their heads. So basically, the computer is making you do system administration all day long. That's your new job, is you're the system administrator of your computer. And what you really wanted to do was to upload a picture of a puppy to your LiveJournal blog. I don't know why. But instead, what you're being asked to do is a system administration task which has nothing to do with the things that you want to do. And so that sort of, it is no surprise that lots of people feel like their computers hate them. That they have a personality, they anthropomorphize their computers. This is an editorial from the fine newspaper, The Onion. My Computer Totally Hates Me by Vicky Helmholtz. About a month ago, I got a new computer here at my reception desk at the dentist's office, and boy, does that thing have it in for me. And this is actually the way a lot of people think. Now, to be absolutely fair, this is a point-counterpoint opinion article, so I need to show you the other perspective. The point, I guess what I'm trying to say is, the whole point of this story really is the question of who's in charge. And who gets to be the boss of what happens with a computer today. And there's actually a true psychological theory, or a real psychological theory, developed by Professor Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania, but it's pretty well recognized today, that one common cause of depression is feeling helpless. By feeling helpless, he means specifically, and this is like weird psychobabble jargon, but when you feel a lack of agency, i.e., you feel like you cannot control things around you, you're not an agent, you don't have the ability to make things do things in the world, you often get depressed or unhappy. And this actually sometimes feeds a very nasty, vicious cycle where something terrible happens to you. You know, a loved one dies, something genuinely terrible. And so you are justifiably unhappy, partially because you can't control the thing that just happened. And the unhappiness actually makes you less likely to try to exert an influence on the things around you in the world. And so it becomes this vicious cycle where because you're unhappy, you stop going to work because you don't feel like you can ever control things. And when things start to go wrong, you say, oh, I'm not in control of my environment. I don't control stuff. And you start to teach yourself a pattern of feeling more and more helpless. And so the feeling of learned helplessness, so what Seligman proposed is when people get into this kind of cycle, which is one cause of depression, it's not the only cause, but it's one cause of depression, is this particular cycle of learned helplessness. It turns out there's a very good cure for it, which is to give the patient something to do in which they can actually exert successful agency or actually influence things in the world around them. And they can be very simple things. So you give somebody tasks like fold these napkins or just go turn off all the lights in the house, or really simple tasks that they're going to be able to accomplish. And bit by bit, you teach people that they do exert some agency over the world, and you can often make them a lot happier by doing this. And this very idea of happiness, being of feeling happy when you're able to successfully control things around you and your environment, is a very powerful notion. I think one of the reasons actually that geeks like to program, and one of the reasons I like to program, is that when you're writing code, the compiler will usually do exactly what you tell it to do, even if it's sort of mindlessly not what you meant, but it's exactly what you told it to do, and that level of control might make you actually a lot more satisfied with your job than, for example, hypothetically, if you're a software CEO and you've got these brainy nerd programmers that each have their own idea for how things should work, and so even like a little kid playing around with army toys, or just fooling around with a logo on your computer, or doing something really, really simple, in which you're actually able to exert agency, is apt to make you a lot happier. So I want to show you a specific example from websites, just a real typical example of the idea of making your users feel like they're in control. And the example I want to give you, this is the Abercrombie & Fitch checkout from the website. And it's just a sort of a normal checkout, except, of course, for the implied message that if you buy the panties or whatever it is that you're buying from Abercrombie & Fitch, you get the dude, which is nice. I mean, there's no other reason for there to be a picture of a hot guy there on the checkout page. But what I want you to notice is the upper right-hand corner. It's sort of hard to see. Notice that there's sort of a 4-step thing going on there. Step number 1, sign in. Step 2, billing. Step 3, payment. Step 4, submit. And it's a sort of a standard wizard dialog. This is it up here. You see these all over the place. We are going to march you through the steps one by one, and you're going to do these things in exact order. Now, this is not the only way to do it. If you compare this to the Amazon checkout page, Amazon gives you a big old page where you can see everything that's going on, and it's got buttons all over it to change things. If you want to change your billing address, you sort of click over there next to billing address. If you want to change what's in your cart, you click over here. If you want to change, I don't know, all kinds of stuff, you can do it all whenever you want to, and you get to decide the order in which you're going to do things, even though it's fairly trivial. And then when you're done, you click the big button that says place your order. So it's a very, very small example of putting the user in control and making them a little bit happier by letting them decide how they want to go through the checkout procedure, instead of making them kind of obey a set program that they were given. I want to another example, a different example of putting people in control happens almost at the microscopic level. You're not going to believe kind of what a trivial level it is. But think about remote controls for your television. What all remote controls for all televisions have in common is these really mushy buttons that don't always work exactly, and they're using some kind of weird infrared nonsense, so that when you click on the button, sometimes it isn't received by the television because the infrared light didn't get over there to the TV set. And so these remote controls are fairly frustrating. Oops. Okay. And so the reason that I bought this clicker actually is, what happens with remote controls with televisions actually? If you watch people using them, they click the button and the channel doesn't change. And there may be several reasons for this. Maybe the battery is dead, maybe the infrared light is not reaching the television set, and maybe the button is just too mushy. But what people will do, even if it's just a battery problem, is they will click harder, right? And then nothing still happens. So they click harder again, and pretty soon they're banging on the little control thingy. But what I did, and sometimes obviously they switch themselves, and so I bought that particular controller because it's got this nice property that it uses USB ports instead of any kind of infrared nonsense, and it's got a very nice solid click feel, so it always works when you click on the button, and it never advances the slides for you when you don't want it to. So that's a little clicker. Okay, back to Abercrombie because I insulted them, and now I want to. Let's say that you're buying this impossibly small T-shirt, which I would highly encourage. When you go to the checkout, the little checkout add to bag button, very similar to, Amazon has a button that says buy now. They call it add to bag. They're using what is now known as Ajax, but is really basically just JavaScript, so that when you click that button, you get instantaneous feedback. It immediately says adding item to bag, and then it says item bagged. It does not do a round trip to the server. It starts telling you that it's adding the item to the bag before it has even tried to find the server, which by now may be lost. It just does a quick in-place JavaScript. So if you compare this to Amazon, on Amazon, when you click Buy Now, the entire web page goes away. You get a little progress indicator. And it's pretty fast on broadband connections, but it still takes, n seconds, some order of seconds. And the entire page starts rebuilding at that point. And you completely lose your place, and you don't know where you were. And it takes a while for the new page to come in, and all kinds of, analytics and all kinds of little GIFs and stuff that were embedded there start coming in and rearranging the page. But what Abercrombie is doing here, and I'll show you one more time. This is, again, a PowerPoint demo, but this is exactly what it feels like. The minute you click on the button, you get add to bag immediately, and then in the background, it sends off a add to bag. It says adding to bag immediately. And then it sends off an asynchronous request in the background. What it's actually doing for the geeks here is in the background, it's loading a little tiny iframe that's too small to see with another page that instructs the server to add the item to the bag. And then that particular iframe uses JavaScript to call back out and change this image. But the real important point here is that instantaneous feedback, 0 seconds. I don't mean half a second or 1 second. This is feedback that's faster than what you can do with HTTP on the public internet. And the only reason that could possibly be there is because it makes you happy to feel like you're in control, that you really added this item to the bag. There's a bunch of other kind of small examples of that, which I want to talk about. If you have an iPod, actually, I think the first generation of iPod actually had a physical knob that you turned on the front. The new ones, it's a touch button that you just sort of, it's called the thumb wheel, and you touch it with your thumb, and you turn it to the right and turn it to the left. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that there's a little clicking sound as you're turning that thumb wheel to the right and turning the thumb wheel to the left. And obviously, there's nothing to click inside the thumb wheel. So that is a synthetic clicking sound that's generated using a little tiny speaker behind the thumb wheel that exists solely for the purpose of making a clicking sound so that you will feel like your thumb on the wheel is actually doing something. And what's kind of amazing is that Apple went to the expense of putting this little tiny speaker behind the thumb wheel when they could have just played the sounds up into your earphones for, and done that all in software, and it would have cost $0. But they actually spent the space in an iPod, which is not exactly readily available, and they spent the money to put that speaker in entirely for the purpose of making you feel like click, 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 like you're actually doing something, like you have agency, and it makes you feel happy to use a thumb wheel because of that nice clicking sound. So, the make people happy formula. I don't know how to make people happy all the time. Some people are just unhappy people. But one thing to think about in terms of making people happy, especially when you're developing software, developing consumer electronics, developing anything, is can you give your users that sort of instantaneous feeling of agency, that feeling that they are in control, that they control the world successfully, and that all else being equal will make people happier. All right, so what does it mean when I say think about emotions? It seems like sort of a slightly bizarre concept. This is the part where there's a little midterm test here. I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to do a survey. You're going to have to raise your hand. It's very complicated. The question I want to ask you, I got two cars here. On the left, that's a Toyota Camry, lovely family sedan, fairly common car. On the right, the Ford Explorer, a best-selling sport utility vehicle. The Ford Explorer SUV is extremely useful if you need to cross any kind of whitewater rivers with all kinds of broken stones in them and stuff on your way to the grocery store. So the question you're going to have to answer, I'll explain in a sec, is which of these cars feels safer to drive? Now, there's a couple of sneaky questions before you answer. First of all, I said feel safer, not necessarily which is safer. We can talk about that. Talk about that in a minute. But more importantly, I'm talking about the driver because everybody knows that the SUV is less safe for society at large because they're always getting into accidents with little Honda Civics and stuff, and the Honda Civic just sort of becomes a big metal disc on the ground on the highway, and the SUV driver probably doesn't know that anything happened. There's also the problem that you're backing out of your driveway in the morning, and you think you feel a little bump, but you don't really know, and then you get distracted by NPR, and when you get to work, your wife calls you up and says, "You ran over the baby," or something. Oh, that's what that noise was. So there's no question that SUVs are unsafe for everybody around them. The question is, though, which one feels safer and which one is safer for the driver inside the car, all right? So we're going to do the survey now. How many people feel like the Toyota Camry, the regular sedan, is safer as a driver for the driver? Raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6. Now, how many people think that the SUV is safer for a driver? All right. Now, I hope you believe me, but that was about equal. That was about half, 50-50. So here's the actual answers, the actual statistics, passenger deaths per million cars per year. Toyota Camry, again, passenger inside the car. Toyota Camry, 41. Ford Explorer, 88. The SUV is actually twice as dangerous, even though it feels kind of safe. And it feels safe. You're like, I'm in a tank. I'm going to be okay. What could possibly happen? Big, heavy car. I'm going to crush everybody that tries to get into an accident with me. How bad is that? So the SUV is actually not very safe, and there's 4 reasons for that. Number one, you're sitting higher, and because you're sitting up so high, there's more of a chance of tipping over just because of the physical shape of this thing. So in an accident, you're more likely to roll or to tip over. Number two, because it's so much heavier, it's too heavy to stop. There's a lot more inertia. So when you do get into an accident, or if you see an accident coming, it takes you twice as long in terms of number of feet to actually stop this car, even if you do the sort of full-on brakes. Number three, for the same reason, the inertia, it's harder to steer at high speeds. So you're more likely to get into an accident because you can't sort of steer around it really quickly because the damn car is too heavy. And number four, this is in the United States only, that these things are legally considered trucks. And trucks have much lower safety standards than passenger cars, and so they don't have to obey all kinds of laws for safety purposes, and that makes it a lot more dangerous. But that's not what I want to talk about. My question is, why do people feel so much safer in an SUV when it's obviously unsafe? And the answer is this is not an accident. And actually, one of the things in the early days of SUVs that was a problem is that people were feeling unsafe in SUVs. And they turned to the cultural anthropologist Clotaire Rapet, who is a French anthropologist who works mostly in the States, consulting mostly with big car companies on the emotional aspects of the vehicles that they're selling and their products that they're selling. So he's sort of the world expert on cultural and emotional coding, whatever that means. Let me just give you a little taste of Clotaire with this video.
We all come from a woman. We all spend 9 months inside of a woman. So women are expert in the inside. Translation, when a woman buys a car, the first thing she is looking at is, do they have cup holders?
I'm sure that didn't make any sense. We all come from a woman, so women are the experts on the inside, so the first thing that they look at when they... Well, I actually found a much more complicated explanation from Clotaire Rapet, as to what the heck he's talking about here. Again, this was the advice that he gave GM and Ford specifically about how to make their SUVs feel safer. Everything around you should be round and soft and should give. There should be airbags everywhere. All right, that actually is safe. So, then there's this notion that you need to be up high. Now, that's a contradiction because the people who buy these SUVs know at the cortex level that if you were high, there is more of a chance of a rollover. Wait, I don't think he meant high in the same way I was thinking of it in that sense. Sorry. If you're high, there's more of a chance of rollover. But at the reptilian level, they think that if I'm bigger and taller, then I'm safer. You feel secure because you're higher and you dominate and you look down. That you can look down is psychologically a very powerful notion. And what was the key element of safety when you were a child? It was that your mother fed you and there was warm liquid, right? That's why cup holders are absolutely crucial for safety. If I can put my coffee there, if I can have my food, if everything is round, or at least two things, if it's soft, and if I'm high, then I feel safe. So those of you that were around, I know you're students and stuff, but a long time ago there was this operating system called Windows 2000, and this is what it looked like. And you might notice that the corners of the windows were like really sharp and flat, and you kind of felt like you might, if you walked by too fast, you might snag your clothes on them or something. But Windows XP rounded the corners. They made these nice pillowy title bars. And so it sort of feels like it's safer by design. That's Windows XP, round, soft, and warm drinks they haven't figured out how to put into Windows XP. That's just one example of thing about emotions. There are a million others. Clotaire Rapet has a good book. You can read about it. Number 3, obsessing over aesthetics. And aesthetics are ridiculously important to people's judgment of products, especially in the higher ranges where they're trying to decide whether to spend $400 on one thing or $250 on another. We can go back to the example of the iPod, and I have to change these slides every 2 weeks because the iPod competition doesn't last very long. But right now, the iPod video, 60 gigabytes, I believe, is $399. The sort of the equivalent competitors, and I don't know if this is the right picture, are $249. Okay, the iPod is rather beautiful if you look at them. There's an enormous amount of attention to detail in terms of making them highly aesthetic. They use a special process to almost completely eliminate the seams You really can't see them. That glassy surface that you get on some of the black iPods and some of the white iPods is this weird combination of glass and metal that they designed for the purpose of the iPod. There's hardly any buttons, hardly any protuberances. There's no little stickers on the back that says Pentium M or designed for Windows XP or any of the junky little stickers that you get on other products. There's only one single connector. Actually, there's the headphones, and then there's a big old connector. Some of the other ones have all kinds of weird connectors attached to them. So it's really a very elegant-looking device. The competition, has all kinds of little extra buttons on it and all kinds of jacks, and there's a little latch that you use to take off the cover and mess with the insides, and there's just all kinds of crap going on the surface. The iPod usually comes in stylish colors. Sometimes they have different colors available, but there are always these very lovely stylish colors. The Creative Nomad Zen Extra comes in ugly. Now, another interesting fact about the iPod, there was a bit of a scandal about this a year ago. It turns out you can't really change the battery. There's no way to change the battery, and lithium-ion batteries last about a year and a half. And so when your iPod battery goes tits up, there's nothing you can do about it. What they really want you to do is throw it away and buy a different one, maybe in a different color. You can send it back to Apple for $69 or something, and they'll replace the battery. But I thought that was really weird. Why don't they just let you change the battery? What would be so hard about having a replaceable battery? Well, look at your cell phone and try to notice just how many details there are on the surface of the phone. Do I have a picture here? That are there solely for the purpose of allowing you to change the battery. There's like a little geegaw here, this little springy thingy that always gets filled up with lint, and sometimes it kind of breaks or it stays closed, and then the battery cover keeps coming off. You got the battery cover there. Around the entire area of the battery cover, there's a seam, which the iPod doesn't have any such seam. And sometimes a lot of phones are even worse, where you'll find all kinds of little extra spacers and little rubber feet and stuff that they've stuck on there to somehow make it possible to change the battery. And in fact, I had a phone where when you remove the little battery cap, they had actually put some extra rubber feet on there so that the battery cover didn't make your phone wobble when you put it down flat on a surface. And so there were just 4 extra protuberances on this thing for the purpose of changing the battery. And I really think that what Apple is doing is they've decided that changing the battery is useful and nice and would save you money and would make you happy occasionally, but it's ugly. And so they have specifically decided that style is more important than comfort or functionality, that the style and the aesthetics of that device are key. And that's really sort of the definition of fashion. So I get into fashion, I start thinking about Paris, and here's a picture of an apartment building in Paris. If you've ever been there, they have these really beautiful old Art Deco apartment buildings or Beaux-Art or whatever from the end of the 19th century, all covered in beautiful gargoyles and all kinds of pretty carvings and stuff. And the neighborhood where I live, the Upper West Side in New York City, has very similar buildings with one key difference. On the Upper West Side, they have fire escapes. Turns out none of these buildings were built in a very fire-safe way because they didn't know about that. And so in America, they started putting fire escapes on these buildings so that you could get out in case of an emergency. In Paris, they didn't because they thought the fire escapes were ugly. And the fire inspectors attempted to force them to put on fire escapes, and the apartment building owners had them legally classified as historic monuments for whatever reason, because the fire inspectors were not required to inspect historic monuments. So, of course, if there's a fire, you burn to a crisp, but you look fabulous. So I guess my thesis here really is to say that the iPod is successful because Steve Jobs is secretly French. Or something like that. We as programmers, software developers, always have a really clear concept, and we can really understand this concept of the separation between the interface and the functionality. And we usually think of it in terms of like the lipstick and the guts, or the iceberg metaphor, where the lipstick is just 10% of the application that reflects the external appearance of the application. And that's just a bunch of fluff that doesn't really matter to us. We really care about the guts, all that stuff down underneath in the bowels, making our software do interesting things and making our appliances functional. But we, as software developers, we actually don't really think that the lipstick is anything more than just a pretty veneer that's applied to something. But to most normal human beings, when they look at your products, when they look at the software that you write, all they see is the lipstick. All they see is the outside veneer. That's what they're interacting with. That's what they see, and that's how they're gonna rate it. I want to tell a little story actually. When I first started Fog Creek Software with Michael over there, my co-founder, and there was one more of us, Bobak, and we had a client. This was back in 2000, and it was at the very end of the dot-com mania. And we had a client that was basically a goofy .com that wanted to do some goofy thing on the web. But in those days, the way people started companies is they would get a bunch of MBAs would get together and come up with some kind of weird idea for a product, and then they would try to hire programmers to do it. And they never really knew how to hire programmers because they didn't know how to tell if programmers were good or not. So these people had hired a major international global consulting firm. I guess they're not a sponsor of this conference, but I still shouldn't mention that their name starts with I and ends with EM. And they had hired them. This little .com had raised $12 million in venture capital, and they had given almost all of it to this consulting firm. And the consulting firm had been working for more than a year with a team of like 12 or 20 people or something on site, and had done absolutely nothing. They hadn't done anything. The only thing they had produced was like a spec that was about this long, like a really tiny fragment of a specification that really only served to show that they didn't know what they were being asked to build in the first place. So this .com was a little bit desperate. They had run out of money, and they had no product to show for it yet. And the VCs were starting to breathe down their necks. And we were a little desperate too. So when they called us up, they said, can you build the whole thing with the 2.5 of you, three people from Fog Creek, and I'm only a half. And can you build this whole thing for us in 3 weeks, please? And we have $68,000 left in our bank account. So we were desperate, so we said yes. And what they told us is, we just need you to build. They couldn't even get approval to bring us in as an official vendor. So officially they said, you guys are working on making a demo, a working, functional demo that does all the things the final product will do, just to show what it will look like so that we can start selling it to customers before IBM finishes making it. That was the story, at least. So we started investigating, and we found a huge shortcut. And in 2.5 weeks, we had pretty much built their thing. Thanks to the shortcut we found. It turns out that they already had almost everything that they needed in Excel spreadsheets, and we figured out a way basically to use the Excel macro language as a web server, more or less. And it was bizarre, but it worked, and it actually allowed the functionality of their application to be exposed, and it probably would have scaled. But we showed them after 2.5 weeks. We said, all right, we got 2 more days. We better show them what we have, just to make sure there's nothing else they want changed, because we only got 2 days left. So we called them all in a darkened room with PowerPoint slides, gave them a demo of what we had built, and we seriously expected them to be overjoyed and happy with us. But they weren't, actually. As it turns out, they all looked kind of sour and unhappy at the end of our demo. And they had, in those days, these .coms, if they wanted to go public, they had to hire an experienced CEO. So they would find somebody with gray hair who had been the CEO of some, tractor company or whatever. And he was there, and he's sort of looking around, not understanding anything that's going on. Luckily, the project manager from their side spoke up, and she said, it just doesn't look slick. And the CEO said, happy finally to have an opinion that he could call his own, said, yes, that is correct. This does not look slick. This is not slick enough. Nothing that unslick will go out the door with our brand name on it. As if he was defending some kind of, 100-year-old brand or something instead of launching a goofy .com. But anyway, and then they went around the room and everybody said, yes, not slick. It needs to be a little slicker. Maybe you can make it more slickified. What we finally agreed with them was that we would sit down with their graphic designer. Their graphic designer would make some recommendations, and we would implement them. And so we did that, and we changed a bunch of the look and feel, changed some screens around, and showed it to them again. And this time they were really, really happy. They thought it was the greatest thing. And even though what we had accomplished the first time was kind of 1,000,000 times more, we had actually sort of saved their butts and their company. That didn't make them happy. What made them happy was seeing the slick demo that we had on Friday after we slickified everything. Luckily, I have here some screenshots of some of the changes that we made. This is the before screen, the unslick. There you go. There's the after. I know some people may not be able to see that in the back. Before, after. Unslick, slick. That's basically all we did. And this is what made them really happy. They were sort of overjoyed. And it turns out that people are kind of superficial. When we were in that room, in the darkened room with the PowerPoint, showing them the unslick demo of what we had built for them, we were showing them pixels on the screen. And we were asking them to respond to those pixels. And they responded to the pixels. They didn't really think about the functionality that was behind it. They thought about what they were looking at. And I guess what this shows is that the world is a lot more superficial than you think. The world is incredibly superficial about stuff like actors. Proof, Keanu Reeves keeps working as an actor. As we say in New Mexico, he's so stupid he couldn't pour piss out of a boot if the instructions were printed on the heel. But somebody figured that out. But he's cute and stuff like that. So that's why they keep hiring him to make more and more Matrix movies. Now, this is rather frustrating to software developers because we don't know how to do this beautiful external stuff. I mean, we can understand when a famous artist like Jean-Michel Basquiat does a self-portrait, and it's obviously a work of great, enormous artistic talent, which we don't have. We can understand why those paintings sell for over $3 million. This one actually is probably worth a lot more than that by now. Or, for example, like a Rothko. These are like classic works of sort of hard to see on that screen, but these are classic works of obviously enormous artistic talent. This one is technically called White on Black and Wine, although I really think it's like a Madonna and Child. Okay, so we're perfectly happy for artists over there in the world of painting to do these works of enormous artistic talent and come up with them. But for software, we don't really know quite how to do that. And so what software developers often do, and this is not the worst possible solution, is to create this concept of skins, where you're going to separate the actual visual appearance from the functionality. And Winamp was one of the first big apps that lots of people knew about to have skins, where you could throw any bitmap edit, and it would use that as a user interface. So I think this was the default. This is another one, which is kind of cool. Here's another one. Again, it's the same application entirely. It's just using a different bitmap to display its front page. You could have Keanu Reeves as your MP3 player if you want. This is one that I kind of like, and people often then, at this point, they start to ask me about sort of the deconstruction movement. This one is called Scribbleamp, and it's just created by somebody drawing with a pencil on some graph paper and scanning it in. And it looks, and it's really kind of weird to be using an application that kind of works with this as the user interface. And what people say is, isn't there an artistic trend towards making things look rougher or making things look simpler, kind of deconstructing them, taking apart all the unnecessary geegaws and the unnecessary decorative frills and just scraping them down to the bare minimum. And what this really comes down to is a claim that there are two competing forces in the design of anything. There are two things which are going to be fighting with each other. The one is the idea of beauty, on the one hand, making something beautiful, and the other is the idea of usefulness, of functionality, sort of truth versus beauty, or beauty versus utility. So this is a beautiful application, but having a picture of Keanu Reeves on your MP3 player serves no purpose whatsoever, whereas this one is actually a lot clearer, a lot easier to see what's going on. It was very easy to make. It's far more utilitarian. Again, the iPod, suffers from the intense bar of soap kind of highly beautiful feeling, but actually, if they just put a stupid battery latch on there, we'd be able to change the battery, and that would be a lot more useful. So let's see, what's my movie example? Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt. Woody Allen. Woody Allen is smart, is funny, married his daughter-in-law. Anyway. In architecture, a long time ago, it was like in the 20s and the 30s in architecture, there was a very, very specific movement, sometimes known as the international movement, to eliminate decoration. And the claim, which won, it really won the day. The claim was that decorations and frills and useless stuff, gargoyles, dentrificated cornices, staircases that go nowhere, gigantic pillars that are holding up nothing, are all decadent. Decoration is decadent because it serves no function. And what happened in architecture is that instead of making museums that look like the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., we started making museums that are highly functional, that show exactly how they work, like the Centre Pompidou in Paris, which has an exoskeleton, so you can exactly see what is holding up the building. You can see all the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. You can see the people movement systems. These are escalators on the front. So a lot of people ask me, hey, if deconstruction is good enough, if the idea of simple functionality was good enough for people who make architecture, and it won. It really won the day. You never see gratuitous decoration. Like this entire campus, you won't find gratuitous decoration because in the 30s, the architects were all absolutely convinced of this. And why doesn't that happen in software? Why can't we go back to this kind of user interface, which describes exactly what you're doing? It's totally useful. It's very functional. It's very fast. It's the kind of user interface that reflects what the computer is actually doing. You know, why do we need this kind of crappy user interface with all kinds of shadows that do not mean anything, with all kinds of rounded corners and fake brushed aluminum? I mean, that would just be considered extremely, extremely decadent by an architect. So I guess my real claim just is that on the aesthetic side, we haven't really gotten to that point yet that they've gotten to in architecture. And this excuse in architecture that there's something bad about decoration or whatever, the truth is that although 100% of all architects agree with that, most people still prefer old buildings. Most people still think that beautiful old buildings from the 19th century are nicer and more elegant than the super modern buildings that are strictly functional. And so, and especially in architecture and in software, I don't think we've gotten there yet. And you can definitely appeal to people a lot more with this kind of interface than with that kind of interface. So, the question we started with was, how do you make, what distinguishes blue chip products? How do you make blue chip products? Especially in the realm of software. How do you make the really excellent software? Turns out it has nothing to do with class libraries or application frameworks or whether you use Ruby or C# or whatever. It has nothing to do with Java, Python, or Perl. It's all about making the happy, comfortable, pretty people. Okay, so if you have to remember one word about this speech, if you only remember one thing that I went on about today in this lengthy rant, it's the concept of misattribution, which if you've taken a psych class, this is a term from psychology, misattribution. How does misattribution in psychology is when you form your opinion about something based on something that's happening that you're not aware of at a physiological level. I guess I could give you an example that would make it a little bit easier to explain. Let's say that you go to a movie, and your friends ask you afterwards, how'd you like the movie? And you tell them that you liked it or you didn't like it. Now, there's a couple of things that might have happened here. Let's say, for example, at this particular movie, that you came in with a gigantic bucket of Coca-Cola, gigantic bucket of popcorn, and you drank the Coke and you ate the popcorn. And again, one of two things can happen. One possibility is that you were sort of stuck in between some fat people in the theater and stuff, and you really had to go to the bathroom, but you thought something important was going to happen. And when your friends ask you, did you like the movie, you say, oh my God, it just went on forever. I don't know why that movie went on for so long. It was really frustrating and painful. The other possibility, of course, is if you have good bladder control, but the caffeine really got you all worked up. They say, did you like the movie? And you say, oh, yes, oh, my God, that was like the best movie I've ever seen. I really liked it. That was really fun. I want to see it again right now. And the misattribution is that you're having a reaction to a bucket of Coke. You're having a physiological reaction that would have happened even if you had been born without a brain to the Coca-Cola. And you're attributing it to saying that's a good movie or that's a bad movie. And they do all kinds of surveys where they find that people that sit on the right-hand side of the theater actually will rate movies higher than people that sit on the left-hand side of the theater. And that couldn't be for any other reason other than some kind of misattribution. Here's another example useful for college students. Let's say that you want to go out on a first date with somebody, with a significant other of the appropriate sex. Should you go to a bar? No, you should go out for coffee. Why? How does that work? Again, misattribution. Your date is sitting there thinking to themselves, drinking coffee, and she's thinking to herself, my heart's beating a little bit faster. Cute guy. I must be in love. And the only reason your heart is beating faster is because caffeine makes your heart beat faster. Again, that's misattribution. Similarly, with software, the idea I'm trying to give you here, with software, with consumer products, your only hope after you've made it do what you need it to do, once you get to that point, is that you have to make it pretty, You got to get the emotional response right. People look at the software, they say, this software makes me happy, I feel like I'm in control. It must be good software. Another possibility is that you have to give a talk. So you could think of something interesting and important to talk about, or you could tell jokes. You could show pictures of Jennifer Aniston. You could play Sweet Home Alabama. Wait, I'll cue that up for you. And the way it works is the people laugh at the jokes. They enjoy the group along with the rhythm. If you're really lucky, as they're filing out of the room, they'll be thinking to themselves, I don't